Yes, well, it is so good to be here. And I am delighted to welcome everyone to on behalf of Division 46, the Society for Media Psychology and Technology, Division 46 of the American Psychological Association. I'm excited to introduce you all to today's topic and the speaker. Before we get to know a little bit more about Dr. Hogg, there are a few housekeeping issues that we need to address. So first of all, please know this presentation is being recorded and will be published to the Division 46 YouTube channel. Secondly, to ask the presenter a question, please put your question in the Q&A, which is at the bottom of the Zoom window and not in the chat section. So that's in the bottom of the screen at the Zoom, in the bottom of the screen in the Q&A section, not in the chat. Dr. Hogg will do her best to answer all of your questions, although she may not be able to answer everything this afternoon, but she has a lot to share with us, so we want to move forward to let her get started. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Jerri Lynn Hogg. She's a pioneering media psychologist, a global speaker on artificial intelligence, and an award-winning educator with over 100 scholarly presentations on media psychology and technology. She is the founder and CEO of Art of Digital Living, and she has advised leaders, organizations, and students on the impact of emerging technologies, integrating research and practice to advance positive media use. Dr. Hogg's expertise spans narrative psychology, digital environments, and cognitive defense, with experience working alongside the U.S. Department of Defense and DARPA, and she has served as president of the APA Division 46, our organization, Society for Media Psychology and Technology, and internationally with the Women in Technology International and AI think tank member. She's renowned for her engaging, future-forward approach, and Dr. Howard empowers audiences to navigate and shape the evolving landscape of human-AI interaction. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you and welcome Dr. Jerri Lynn Hogg. Jerri Lynn?
Thank you, Susan. It's really great to be here with you. It's an honor to be part of the American Psychological Society for Media Psychology and Technologies webinar series. And it's also quite the honor because it's my home division at APA. As you know, my research and passion has always been around the intersection of media and technology and psychology. Even early in my career, I worked blending engineering with psychology. Media psychology didn't exist as we know it back then, but it certainly was where my passion was. My current emphasis is in AI, and artificial intelligence seems to be integrated everywhere. My goal today, though, during our discussion is really to provide some information so that we can better understand how artificial intelligence impacts us personally and professionally, and how we might be able to use it better to enhance our well-being. So let me share my slides. Are we good? Can you see them?
Yes.
Yes,
Great.
we can see them.
All right. So artificial intelligence is influencing our personal and professional lives, but it's also impacting how we relate with each other, how we connect, how we make meaning, and how we search for information to make that meeting. So there's a whole variety of areas of your life where artificial intelligence has touched. There's probably more areas it's touched than it hasn't. How do you get your information? Now, if I had asked this question 4 years ago, plus or minus a few months, most people would say one of the first places they go to is Google. I know a lot of you on this call are researchers, so you probably use databases as well. But Google is a commonplace, or a search engine like Google, for us to get our information. But Google search doesn't function in the same way that it did now that generative AI um, is here and has become the new kid on the block. And or at least we're not using it in the same way as we did in the recent past. Now, when you put a search in, you get a synthesized response from a conglomerate of sources at the very top of the page. And I don't know about you, and I'm a researcher and I like to be able to get my facts, know exactly who they are, go and check out all the other listings that are usually on a search. Um, yeah, it's pretty easy when that AI is generating that summary at the beginning of the search. It's easy to get quickly the information you need. Unfortunately, you don't necessarily always know where that information is coming from and how correct that information is. But the positive is that you can put just a casually misspelled, grammatically incorrect phrase into the search bar, and instead of spending a lot of time to be very thoughtful about key search words and combinations, you can bring up that specific content that you desired. So why am I talking about that? It's because our behavior and how we search and how we receive information is changing, and it's changing rapidly. We can now receive information very quickly. It's easier than it's ever been. It's at our fingertips. And it can not only with that laser speed and focus, it can give us a whole variety of information. What we don't know is that information real, valid, an opinion, propaganda, marketing, advertising, the list goes on. And because of that, and that beautiful synthesis of information, which a lot of times is all I need to move forward, we don't necessarily know exactly how accurate it is. So those old tools that we use to evaluate information and whether it was accurate or not are starting to change, and we are needing to find new tools to be able to search that information. So I wanted to give you an example of a new browser. I have been using Perplexity Comment, so that's why I have it over to the side there. There are a variety of others, including Google AI Mode, ChatGPT Atlas, Opera, and this is not an exhaustive list. But I ask it, can you explain how you are different from a typical browser and yet still be a browser? Well, I'll save you the need to go through all of it, but that idea that it's really combining AI with search so that you can get a more robust information than you would in that synthesis that's currently at the top of a Google search. Also, with Perplexity, they cite their sources. You might be able to see at the end of each of these paragraphs, it has a citation that you can click on and go to the original source. These are ideas of how you might be able to be mindful about how you search information and how you can stay on point with the latest. One thing, and this is a caveat I want to use throughout this whole presentation, is that we know things are moving very rapidly in technology. They always have been, but it is even faster now. So while I'm giving you some examples and telling you how it's operating as of today, it can change tomorrow. It might even change this afternoon. What I'm suggesting for you is that I'm giving you some of the psychological concepts, some of the strategies and tools that we might want to always be aware of as we're adopting new technologies. So how do we think about AI? Public opinion is ever evolving, with the biggest construct being our optimism and the benefits of AI, and then also our fears and risk and that impact on society. So we often look at it as the tools that speed up our productivity and make things easier, and then sort of that existential risk for humanity that we worry about as far as what will AI do and change in our lives. So let's break this down a little bit more, that help versus challenge, and that idea that different ways that artificial intelligence, and I want to take a quick moment to say I'm primarily talking about generative AI because artificial intelligence has been around for quite some time. I have spoken about artificial intelligence before the chat GPT or the generative AI, but in many cases, the things that are coming forward to us are the ones that are accessible for the general population, as well as businesses and corporations. So different ways that AI might be able to help is we can get information, as I mentioned earlier, much easier and quicker and a lot more detailed than we were able to get it in the past. We don't need fancy prompts. Sometimes you can just put a phrase in and it already knows what kinds of things, the directions you might be going with your inquiry. It diminishes the learning curve. Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. And it also can be an assistant. You can tell it what to do. And let's face it, it's a lot nicer to be able to tell a piece of technology what to do than another person. So it makes life a little bit easier in that way. Some of the challenges is it takes away our control, perceived or real. Waters down our intelligence. A lot of people are very concerned about that. If I can go to AI and ask a question and immediately get information, I don't have to be thinking about where that information is coming from and be as strategic about my search and how they're all interconnected because it makes those interconnections for us. The idea of fake information or fake news, again, how do you trust the validity? And obviously, sometimes it was just seeing was believing. Now the technology with images, video is very sophisticated, and it's getting more and more difficult to discern. And in general, just the difficulty to trust. Now, let's talk a little bit more again and go into a little bit more detail about some of the benefits and the opportunities that we can have with AI. AI can drive innovation, such as advanced diagnostics. This is something that I find incredibly powerful and helpful. That idea that information we might not have been able to have to quickly heal, we can now be in our healthcare professionals can help us very quickly with additional information that one singular person, even if they were a great diagnostician, might not be able to do without the wealth of information that AI can provide at fingertips. Therapeutic options in that same kind of way, automating many routine tasks so that we can have that human intervention, that human intelligence, the emotional, the capabilities that is really primarily human, be able to drive it, and then have those automatic routine tasks being taken care of by AI. And also along those same lines, improving efficiency. It has the potential of personalized medicine. We've heard many times over that we know in general this might help, but we know each person, each body experiences things differently. And so that way we would be able to have it fine-tuned to you specifically. In industry, it helps optimize processes. It increases our access to information. And finally, we've been seeing tremendous help in education and in accelerating research. And I'll talk about education and research a little bit later in the talk. Now, let's get back to the concerns and fear because they're real. The idea that AI is replacing human judgment in decision making. I alluded to that a little bit earlier, but that idea of the time and the information and the thoughtfulness that we might put into making a decision where we have an AI component that does that much more rapidly. The downfall is where are they getting that information and where are they grabbing it from to make that assessment? And do they need some further nuances that might change things? And we see this in the concern of privacy and surveillance and even a misuse of personal data. That idea of maybe an insurance company needs to find information to whether to accept or deny a claim. And without those nuances, AI might say to deny the claim where a human would be able to discern that it should be accepted. The distrust, that idea that regulating AI effectively and do we know whether the output we're looking at can be trusted? The technology outpaces our existent control. So in other words, usually with our own, we can control things. This is going so quickly that you're not able to necessarily follow all the pathways. And then the emotional anxiety. There is a lot. The unintended consequences and the idea of biases that built in, or the general idea that we've lost control. Some examples also might be, job displacement and that automation anxiety. Will AI replace us? I talked about bias a little bit, but that really going into that decision making in a domain like recruitment or welfare eligibility. Um, that idea of loss of human compassion in the therapeutic or caregiving area, the risk of surveillance or normalization of mass data collection. While I talked about just in the previous slide about the personalization, we also have to deal with sometimes the opposite of being sort of part of a mass data collection. And if we don't fit the norm, where does that put us in interpretation? And that breakdown of trust of professional roles, doctors, teachers, judges, etc. So while we're thinking about these concerns and fears, I thought we really should think about artificial intelligence and how versus human intelligence and how we process information. Because by looking at that fundamental difference between artificial intelligence processes and humans and how we think, we'll be able to get a better understanding of maybe how we can move forward in a very positive way, interacting and engaging with artificial intelligence. So AI is particularly good with speed and precision, pattern recognition, and humans are particularly good at creativity and adaptability and our emotional intelligence. So let's look at again in that kind of way, looking in a slightly different piece of that. And AI excels at tasks that require speed, precision, pattern recognition with really detailed data sets. But humans are characterized by creativity and emotional intelligence and a contextual understanding that AI hasn't quite advanced to see at the capabilities of humans and the adaptability to novel situations. As far as understanding these differences is really crucial for developing AI systems that can complement and augment the human condition. And really, for future advancements in AI, it may bridge some of these gaps. But right now, that unique quality of human intelligence will likely remain essential to all of our really complex problem solving and creative endeavors, and also, obviously, our social interactions. So let's think about how we can reframe that narrative. Let's focus on human behavior and let's focus also on the science of getting comfortable with AI. So we're all in this world where AI is driving many things around us, and I don't see it stopping. So how can we help guide it so that we can all thrive? So when we talk on about reframing the narrative. We're talking about people and how we adapt and connect and make meaning of while we're transforming along with that technology. AI isn't just a technology leap, it's also a human leap. It reshapes how we're learning. Um, all of us have experienced that. Um, how we're socializing, how we're making meaning of our life. And so our challenge here is to lead and not react, guide people through what is a rather complicated but a very transformative time. AI isn't just changing technology, it's changing really all of those things, how we are connecting. And many of you on this webinar today are psychologists, so our expertise is more important and more urgent than it ever has been. One thing we know, whether we like it or not, is change is constant. Change has been constant in human history. But the speed and scale of AI disruption feels a little bit different. It's moving exponentially. And it's not just our jobs or the tools that we're concerned about. It's more about how we live and how we relate and think and how do we adapt to these rapid changes. This fast change can be quite unsettling, but keep in mind, this is not different. As humans, we've always had to deal with change. And so while it's unsettling, it has always been. So let's refer back and think back about how we handle change. It might be a very important area for people to go into change research and how we respond to it. I know there's a lot out there, but even now that we're dealing with AI moving so quickly, this is a great area. Every breakthrough, if we think about it, electricity, the internet, have all begun with some kind of uncertainty. And then we've used science to help reframe our anxiety. So let's look at the speed and scale that AI disrupts. Let's look at AI changing, but not necessarily changing what we're doing, maybe how we're doing it, and think about how it impacts us. And then continue to look at how humans have always adapted to technology leaps and changes, and how, while anxiety often happens, how can we ultimately shift our focus into being creative and resilient. So instead of focusing on that dysfunction, let's spotlight what's working, highlighting that joy, that connection, that agency that AI is starting to provide us. I come from a positive psychology framework, and positive psychology can be used here and applied to AI and media by guiding us to a more empowered change. How can we make this human-centered? I think this is a really critical piece, is making the technology human-centered. Singleton said or asked, are designs serving people? What if media fueled empathy and meaning, not just engagement? So think about centering people means prioritizing well-being, calls for proactive, ethical, and heartfelt design. And then finally, media can build bridges, not just silos. So each wave of technology brings worry, optimism, but ultimately transformation. AI is the latest chapter in this ongoing story of transformation. Each tech shift seems unsurmountable at the time, but psychology has shown us that as human beings, we are resilient. Meaningful adoption comes from understanding, not resistance. So let's think about that media equation. We treat tech like people. Reeves and Naths found that people unconsciously apply social rules to technology. We often say thank you to chatbots and are polite, like to Alexa. For those of you that have used ChatGPT, I want to know how many of you have said thank you or notice that when you phrase something more kindly, that maybe you received a more positive response versus if you didn't. And I tested this out. It's only anecdotal research, but for me, that was my experience as well. We say please to things like Siri, and we get frustrated at chatbots. We have many, I don't know if any of you have gotten to those circular chatbot conversations with a retail establishment, but sometimes it's just like, just give me a human being because you're not getting this. So we really need to recognize that we need emotional design and social scripts in AI so that it can enhance that engagement. So the media equation explains why design and voice matter so much. These cues tap right into social writing for better or worse, our wiring for better or worse. So, this is the latest, and how can we thrive in this area? Technology enhances our self-expression and our identity. So the AI tools really help us in our storytelling. Maybe you're having a hard time articulating something, and then you can go into artificial intelligence and ask, how might I be able to say this better? I can think of a few difficult letters I had to send, and while I didn't take the letters verbatim, it helped me prime. I would a lot of times say, this is the kind of thing I want to say, but I need to say it softer, gentler, more direct, what have you, and then be able to put it and get back from AI how I might be able to write something that's a little bit more empathetic. And then, of course, readjust from there. But that idea that AI is great for creative arts and also really helps with our self-expression. Now let's get into education just a little bit. This is a very controversial area, and most educational institutions have worked hard to come up with AI policies, whether you're not allowed to use it in this classroom or for this course, to you're encouraged to do it. You have to say that you used it, or you have to show exactly what you did. There are really great things that AI is being able to do. Again, we're getting into that idea of personalization so that you can fit that learning experience that fits perfectly with the person who is taking the course. And in this particular way, this is very good for neurodivergent learners. It also helps with accessibility. It makes the education more inclusive and provides language support. I know that I was doing a talk I physically was in the United States. The attendees were in China, and I was able to very seamlessly have a conversation with them because of all the language support. And I didn't need a live translator at the time. They were there in case we got into some issues, but we didn't have to stop the moment of the conversation to be able to read back and forth what was being said. So there's a lot of great things happening there. Some of the challenges, though, that we have with education and some concerns that are coming up is, will the students just put the prompt in to AI, take that information and create their paper? And there are, much like there were plagiarism software, they're working on AI software, detector software. The issue, I believe we need to learn how to use AI, and we're doing students a disservice if we don't teach them and allow them to use this tool as they're learning. We just have to figure out a way that it enhances their learning as opposed to misplace it or replace it, and they are not challenging and learning in the process. And that makes me think back to math, calculators, or other technology that might have been used, and the idea of show your work. In other words, you could come up with the answer to a mathematical equation, but you had to show all the steps and processes that you used to be able to come up with that. So in the same kind of way, what did you ask AI? How did you interpret this? How did you bring this information in? Having conversations, whether we're like we might co-view something with a child when we're looking at television or a game, we may co-work with them or walk through and spend a lot of time in the different steps to do that. The reason why I think this is so important, not only for them to learn that, but that idea of what we call agency. Once they have that control, we see positive benefits in well-being by being able to accomplish something and know how to do it. And once they get out into a career or other parts of life and have to encounter AI, they'll be knowledgeable and have the resources and the understanding to be able to. I think the key here is being transparent about how and why it's being used on both sides, both the teacher and the students. AI in healthcare, AI can equip healthcare workers with the framework to ask the right questions, to assist with disease diagnostics, and also be able to monitor patients, identify risk, help with the clinical workflows. We do know of different issues that have come up when it hasn't gone exactly right, such as in triage situations where there's been some bias built in. And so they're still working. AI is not perfect, but being able to know of where there might be some weak spots is important, but also the idea of how many different areas this might be able to help to give everybody better health care. This is an interesting study that took place. It's out at Emory University, and they were testing, how does a chatbot diagnose versus how a physician might be able to diagnose symptoms. And they found that, yes, the chatbot did match or beat the physician on triage. There wasn't any gross inaccuracies. There also weren't any hallucinations. Other studies have shown that there's a very high accuracy rate versus the checkers, but guess who had the better bedside manners? Yes, the doctors. And then Mayo Clinic, WebMD, and others are integrating AI conversations into their platforms. So there's at least a little bit more interactivity and a broader knowledge base than when someone just went and read something off of WebMD. So ironically, this research went to press right after a viral story of a boy who saw 17 doctors for chronic pain, but then was finally diagnosed with ChatGPT. Again, I think there's still room for improvement, but the idea that there's some benefits of being able to use this in healthcare. I'll just briefly hit here. We already probably are familiar with the benefits of digital assistants, the plethora of things that they can do that can then make the work of the physician, the clinician, the psychologist much easier. But it can handle everything from scheduling documents and note taking and coding and a lot of the back office work. The technology here is continuing to be fine-tuned and get better, being HIPAA compliant, and so some of the maybe the initial glitches people saw are being addressed. There's a pretty powerful use of by the digital assistant. What I would recommend that if you are using AI in your practice and using a digital assistant, that you be transparent with it. In other words, be able to share the summaries with your clients and tell them how and let them see how information's being put together. In the therapeutic space, we know that AI can really assist, again, personalizing plans, creating mental health support, maintaining that therapeutic relationship. What AI is not, it is not a replacement for that human therapeutic relationship. In other words, what it's doing is giving you those kinds of things that are that stopgap. In other words, when someone couldn't immediately get to their therapist, they might be able to get into a program that would be able to help them in the interim and then direct them to their therapist. It is very controversial about the support, but there has been some research that mild anxiety or depression benefit from chatbots. I wonder if that goes back to these days we're so familiar with Zoom and webinars and that kind of connection. But back in the day when people were always going in person for their therapy, they found that some people, when they weren't in person, when they were on a phone, did better with their therapist as far as working on their depression. What it was theorized, the difference was that they did not see the facial expressions of their therapist. So maybe in that same way, the chat bot is not giving a response to the therapist is the way they think the therapist would want them to respond by checking into the body language and the facial expressions, but rather direct because it's the chat bot. There's a whole variety of research here and it's ongoing. I think that we should think of chatbots and AI in these kinds of situations as additive as opposed to replacement. How can we make that situation even better, even safer um, for everyone involved? And again, that idea that by giving people the tools, they can not only have that kind of content, but that also maybe empowers them to further shape their lives. I'll just go over this one very briefly because it's still controversial and it's still being worked out. But that idea of being able to replace human participants with artificial intelligence for psychological research in the way that ideally it would not harm a human, but rather be able to be a AI bot and then be able to run the research. And there's a variety of different ways that that's been being explored and researched right now. I highly recommend that you look into some of the American Psychological Association's research on that. I was participant of a panel with other researchers that were using and talking about using artificial intelligence to replace human participants. So you heard me mention this several times, but let me talk about agency. And I think we really need to be designing for agency. That idea that we need to give people the tools, not just the content, and that it helps empower them, helps them shape their digital world. And I think AI is poised in such a great position to do that. So designing for that agency involves really transitioning users from doing passive consumption to active creation, enhancing their digital self-efficiency and empowerment. Years ago, with a colleague of mine, Dr. Pamela Rutledge, we did a study, and we were just looking at, do you Photoshop yourself or not? And we were looking at avatars people were putting on to their Facebook profile. What's interesting that what came out of this, which our surprise finding, it had to do with agency. The people with the highest well-being in this situation happened to be the ones that felt like they knew how to Photoshop. It wasn't the fact that they Photoshopped, but they knew how to do that, that built-in agency, the competency of being able to use the tool. And I think we can certainly direct that in the same way towards AI. Critical is building trust in AI. We still have good reason not to trust it in many situations. So we're just scratching the surface of the potential of AI. I believe we need to work on building trust in AI. The best way to do that really is to create policies and guidelines for ethical use in AI and to create that space for those policies and guidelines to adjust as the technology evolves and how human consumption of the technology evolves and how that all integrates. And we still want to keep humans first. We want to protect that human autonomy and data. We want to try to minimize bias. I say minimize. Obviously, we want to eliminate. I don't believe total elimination of bias is possible, so we want to make it as minimal as possible. And always focus on responsible use of AI. It's embedded in our everyday life, into businesses, the government, medicine, everywhere we look. AI is being used now. We need to help people and organizations to adopt it responsibly. And I really like to think of trust in the AI and human relationship, that idea that trust is key in human relationships with AI. And we really need to build it so that there's transparency, integrity, and dependability. And finally, AI interfaces need to mirror healthy human relationships. So where do we go from here? Well, psychological science is key to healthy human AI behavior. We know that change equals opportunity. And if we can guide it so that we can have intentional, positive designs, let's do that. And let's keep building that positive AI future. Leading with science, empathy, and intention really ensures that the AI elevates human flourishing. Yes, there's change, and we know that change is difficult, but it also can make space for more opportunity. And I'd really love for us to build a positive future with AI. We know that the future of psychology is at that intersection of human connection and intelligent machines. And as psychologists, how might we lead in shaping that positive, meaningful human technology relationship? I'd like to have a conversation about that. And I'd like to open it up in just a couple minutes. I hope you have questions, but I'd really like to think about how we might be able to shape positive, meaningful human technology relationships. I also want to remind us to not lose sight of new technologies. I believe AI is going to be the fuel that's behind our technologies and how we work, but AI will start to not have the focus. It'll just be the fuel. And instead, what kinds of things are we going to put on top of that fuel? So, what other technologies are out there? And to keep mindful and still be focused on it. Don't be so myopic that we're only focused on AI. I believe we have all kinds of possibilities in the future. In this AI mediated world, we can make things faster, better, we can be more informed about our decisions. And with that, we can bring in that human element and make a brilliant future. And I'd like to open it up to questions. I wanted to bring this up because I think it'll change every day, but a lot of times people want to know, what kinds of things am I playing with right now? And wanted to put a short list, and I'm by no means an expert at them. I'm just playing around with them to see what their capabilities are. This is to give you an idea of different types of things that are out there. What I find is sometimes the stress and anxiety gets ramped up when, like, I need to learn AI and I need to do this and be able to do this and do that. And I'm like, no, You don't need to be on all the different, all the different, for me, it's Perplexity, but Chat GPT or Grok, all these different things. You don't need to be on all of them. Find one or two that you're comfortable with and use those. And then from time to time, experiment with something else. I believe education is critical for our future, that we need to stay current and savvy about it, but don't get overwhelmed that you need to know everything. And it's all changing. What is so great about that everything's changing? As psychologists, we know about humans and we know how we adapt to change. We know the anxiety and the different areas where we might be able to mitigate or what situations or what might exacerbate different situations. So I suggest that we look at how we can have that beautiful interrelationship with technology. And I also think that it's critical that we spend some time disconnecting. It means something different for everybody, whether taking a walk or having a chat with a friend that's in person, having a sense of presence somewhere. I think that that will actually enhance our time that we do spend with technology. So I want to thank everybody and look forward to hearing from you. I have my email up there. I believe it'll also be in the notes. I look forward to, if you want the slide deck, I'm happy to share that with you. Just send me an email if you want to follow up questions beyond the time we have right now, or if you're watching the recording, feel free to email me. And I look forward to connecting with you either by email or LinkedIn or a future seminar. Thank you.
Thank you for that incredible presentation, Dr. Jerri Lynn Hogg. Your long-term experience in working in this area and your ability to um, uh, bring your knowledge and expertise as a media psychologist, as a media person, a technology person, and a psychologist is reflected in how you've reviewed in your perspective on the possibilities and the limitations. And your positive psychology looks at the possibilities. Um, I'm going to start. I didn't see any questions in the chat, so I'll ask one. And it is, as you know, a lot of my work is on disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation. And although I've had to counterbalance that with something about positive psychology, one of the things that has uh, kept me a bit uneasy is not the challenge of what the technology can do, but those who influence or who program the technology. As we know, garbage in, garbage out. And I'll give you an example. I use generative AI. I use a lot of AI. And I discovered that when it came to attempting to create images of Black people, that they were always distorted continuously to the point that I am so irritated, I've decided I'm writing the president of the company. So the trust and with those who are creating the technology. I think that's probably more the trust issue than what the technology itself will do. So what is your perspective on helping us to overcome those things that we absolutely have no influence over? You know, how do you suggest that we approach that?
That's an excellent question and a very challenging one, and one that I don't think that I'm going to have any kind of definitive answer, because I do think that's a big concern. We've always had a problem with disinformation, and to your point, and what I was trying to bring out here is it's now exponential with
Mhm.
those kinds of tools.
Mhm.
So I think that the best, and this is not a quick solution, the best is to be able to educate so that we have an idea that we are aware of these kinds of issues are happening. We can get more into, I don't, I, I, I don't necessarily want to say political, but I can't think of a better word right now, about being able to, I mean, a powerful way, because usually what happens is the people with the companies with a lot of money that are creating these things are
Mhm.
not thinking about the ethical
Right.
components. They're thinking about, oh, this is really cool. Look what we can do.
Mhm.
And it's not until other people get in there to say something that they, first of all, even know that that's a problem.
Mhm.
Then the next part is, do they care if it's a problem? If they're still
Right.
selling it and going along fine, they might not care. And
Mhm.
so how do you push the ethical behavior on them?
Mhm.
And that is not my area of expertise as far as ethics and changing um, uh, someone's ethics, but I think that's a critical area for research that we can do that. I know that money talks. I know
Mhm.
a lot of times that politics can change things. I really do believe we need to have policies and procedures for how we go about this. My biggest fear about having definitive laws oftentimes is that it actually prevents what we're trying to
Mhm.
change because the
Mhm.
technology is moving. Because I there are steps and it is getting better, or there are getting better at having a better representation,
Mhm.
but those are micro steps. And
Right.
when I say better, I mean it's not as bad as it was. I don't mean that it's where we even begin to want it.
Mhm.
But I really wish I had a great answer to that. And I
Mhm.
don't. I think being educated consumers, and that's what I was talking about. Why I brought up that Google search part at the beginning, is the tools that we were taught, like, oh, if this is, does this look right to you,
Mhm.
are no longer um, as useful or are working quite as well because the technology is getting so good that I can look at something and not necessarily see it, right? Because it looks close enough. So
Mhm.
you're the exaggerations that I thought I heard you say, the exaggerations that you're saying that they're putting on Black people's image, they could exaggerate them enough but not enough that's as discernible. So enough that em, is emotionally evocative, but not enough to make it cognitively evocative. And that's a bigger problem.
Mhm. 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 Well, thank you. We have another question, so we want to get to that. How do you keep up with AI trends since it is constantly changing?
I have a few newsletters that I follow. They come out 5 days a week or something like that. And there's days where I just don't have enough time and I delete them. But I try to use that just as one general pulse point. And then it's interesting because you might sometimes see I mean, you follow three or four and you might see the same thing really popping. I am fortunate enough that I'm on a think tank with the Women in Technology International, so that I'm able to see some of the latest and greatest. And because this is an area that I'm passionate in, I'm also on a few listservs and other. So I'm getting information from a variety of sources besides consuming information just on my own.
Mhm.
And then I'm playing with it, but I think I'm playing with it as a light user compared to, I know there's some people are doing are heavy using, building their businesses on it, et cetera. And I just don't have the bandwidth to do that. But if someone's asking how, Again, I would say to get started with an area that particularly interests you, either follow someone, get on a newsletter, go someplace that I would go where you're comfortable or where interests you first, and then maybe add a few things because I have time and time again seen people get on overwhelm and overload and then just walk away. Like I can't handle it. I got to walk away from this.
Mhm.
And so it was that if there's a follow-up, let me know. But
Well, we have time for one more question because we're at 1 o'clock. And this person said, thank you for the first question. I guess that was mine. And it says, is it possible that, for example, ChatGPT is politically minded or is driven with a political perspective?
okay,
Is
so
it?
now we're gonna get into politics, and maybe I shouldn't, but yes, I do. I mean,
Mhm,
but then again, what in life, what kind of businesses
mhm,
and organizations in life aren't politically driven one way or another?
mhm,
And that's why I don't have a great answer for the first question that you
mhm,
had, Susan, is
mhm.
because
Right, right. And I just think that it is up to us to be diligent and as you mentioned earlier, you do have to be mindful about the content you receive. Remember that it is a tool and that it gives references as you showed with your own presentation, there are references. And so check them, verify them. So it's a challenge, but we are just really out of time. And we are so appreciative of your taking the time to share with us all of your research. You've spent so many years working in this area, and as you mentioned, it's just so much to cover that it really helps to have someone who can help us to put it all in context. And we appreciate you doing that for us today. So if anyone has any other questions or something you want to think about it a while, you can contact Dr. Jerri Lynn Hogg. Um, she is a member of our division. So you can find her email address since it's not written here. You can find that and contact her through the listserv directly. And with that, we have upcoming webinars. The next one will be on December 15th, what is traumatic media with Kristen Lear. She's an NSF GRFP fellow and a PhD candidate at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. So that's something to look forward to. And then our own Dr. Danny Wedding, who will talk about movies and mental illness. Dr. Wedding has been covering movies and psychology for a very long time. So I know that there is a wealth of insight that we can look forward to there. Um, all of the sessions are available. Most of them are available on our YouTube channel. Certainly today's presentation is available on our YouTube channel if you would like to go back and revisit it. And you can just scan the QR code, or you can go to the address listed here at the bottom, www.youtube.com/@ media psych and tech. And with that, I think that we would like to thank everyone for their attention and for participating with us today. It's been such a wonderful presentation, and we look forward to hearing more from Dr. Jerri Lynn as we look at the changes that we know we can anticipate with AI. There's always something new to learn. So we thank you again for your time and for your commitment to the passion that we all have for media psychology and technology. And thank you to each of you, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you
thank
so much.